All right, welcome in. It is the Breer Report for May the 21st. We've got a mailbag edition coming for you. We are in Minnesota right now. I'm at the Vikings facility. That's because the league meeting was here in Eagan, Minnesota, across the way at the Omni Hotel, and we will cover everything from the league meeting a little bit later in the week. The tush-push ban, of course, was shot down. That needed 24 votes to pass. They only got 22. The Lions' proposal for open seating in the playoffs, that was pushed to 2026. I still think that's something they're going to look at, but a little bit further down the line. And then, of course, the measure to allow for NFL players to play in Olympic flag football in 2028 was voted through. We've got plenty of discussion coming on that over the coming weeks. But again, we want to get to your questions here and another mailbag edition. As always, we've got more answers to more questions on the website at themmqb.com. You can check out the print mailbag there. Our first question for the video mailbag this week is from Bobby Boberson. That's at Meh Intentions. Do you think the Bills added enough on D to get over the hump? Now, one of their main focuses this offseason was to try to get more athletic on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that they did accomplish that in the draft. Maxwell Harrison, their first-round pick, the corner from Kentucky, is one of the most athletic players, period, in the draft class, ran one of the fastest 40s at the combine. He should add some speed to the defensive backfield that has really needed it. They spent their first 5 picks on defense. They added a defensive tackle in TJ Sanders, who's got a really high ceiling. They added Landon Jackson from Arkansas to play defensive end. And they've really leaned into their youth. And again, the focus there is on trying to get more athletic on the defensive side of the ball. They pay Greg Rousseau. They pay Christian Benford. I look at that group as having gotten a little bit faster across the board. They're leaning more into their young players. And then the one veteran addition that they did bring on, that's Joey Bosa. That could go either way. Like, a lot of that is dependent on his health. And he's had trouble staying healthy over the years. But when he's been healthy, he's been really, really good. And if you consider that he'll be put on a defensive line in Buffalo, where you have Ed Oliver, where you had Greg Rousseau, there could be some favorable matchups there for Joey Bosa where you really could get more out of him, again, if he can stay healthy. Our second question for this week is coming from Stuart Landsberg. That's at SJ Landsberg. Does Chicago look at veteran free agents like Chubb for their running back room? Stuart, I think for right now, they're probably going to try to get a longer look at what they've already got on the roster. That, of course, starts with DeAndre Swift. And I think some people have made the mistake of thinking that Ben Johnson is out on DeAndre Swift because while Ben Johnson and DeAndre Swift were together in Detroit, things may not have ended perfect. He winds up getting traded. But I can tell you that the main motivation behind the trade for Detroit, they looked at a player who was really banged up, who had what they believe would be long-term injury concerns. And they made the decision at that point, it's time to cut bait. It's time to trade him. If we can get something significant for him, which they wound up getting a 4th-round pick for him, we've got the flexibility to move on. That, of course, was the year that they went out and got Jahmyr Gibbs in the draft. So they did have that flexibility. They wind up going and getting David Montgomery that offseason. So they remade their backfield. But Ben Johnson and DeAndre Swift did have some success together, and I think DeAndre Swift can play that sort of passing game back role. He's not quite as explosive, of course, as Jahmyr Gibbs, but he can play that role in the offense. And then it'll be interesting for me to see what they get out of Roschon Johnson. Now, Roschon Johnson, when he came out a couple of years ago, was one of these guys that was sort of seen as a sleeper, who had a lot of physical ability but played behind Bijan Robinson at Texas. He's 225 pounds, so he would fill a little bit more of the David Montgomery role in Ben Johnson's offense. So you have that sort of combination. Again, maybe not at the level the Lions have it, but you have that sort of combination that Ben Johnson had in Detroit. Now they'll get 4 or 5 weeks to really get a hard look at what they've got at the position, get to see those guys in more competitive situations, and I think they plan for there. I would never rule out the idea that they could make another move there. I think that's certainly possible. But just for the here and the now, my guess would be they want to get a good look at what they've got in Swift and Johnson. Finally, the third question for this week, that's from Merm Andy. That's at I am Merm Andy. Many Dolphins fans and some journalists think they will significantly regress, but the league has bestowed them 5 primetime games. So clearly they think they can compete. What's your take? Well, as for where the Dolphins are, I think they are in a little bit of a natural reset. Losing Teron Armstead, I think, is, a part and parcel to that, where you're okay, like now, you're going to be reworking the left tackle position. What does that mean for the rest of your offensive line? Is Patrick Paul hit as a 2nd-round pick going into year 2? Tua is going to have to, I think, take on a little bit more of the burden of carrying the offense now as a result of some of the moving pieces. What are you getting from Tyreek Hill? He's coming off of probably his toughest year as a pro last year. Is he still the player that you would hope he could be? Where is Anthony Weaver's defense in year two? Is Jalen Ramsey still going to be there? I'd still say the likelihood is that he winds up getting traded. But you just have a lot of moving pieces. You've got some guys coming back from injury on the defensive side of the ball, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips. So you're looking at, again, kind of, I think, this year of transition. Now, why would they have 5 primetime games? I think some of it's circumstantial. There's a lot of primetime windows now. It's easier to get primetime games than it was in the past. And I also think to some degree they're a compelling story. I think Mike McDaniel's become compelling. I think Tua Tagovailoa has become compelling. I think the whole story of the Miami Dolphins is compelling. And so they are a brand name team. They always have been. I don't know if they're a flagship franchise on the level of the Cowboys or the Steelers or the Packers, but they are. I think they do have some cachet with their name. And again, I think some of the storylines that we'll be looking at in 2025, this should be a team that's at least talked about. And I think they're at least interesting. And I think that's why you feel comfortable putting them in those primetime games. But if you look at those primetime games, I wouldn't say that they're the headliner in those games, which, to me is part of the whole deal. All right. Always appreciate the questions. Always appreciate the feedback. You feel free to get me all the feedback you need ahead of training camp at Albert Breer on Twitter, at Albert R. Breer on Facebook, at Albert_Breer on Instagram. And again, be sure to check out our mailbag online, the print edition of the mailbag at themmqb.com. More answers to more of your questions there. We will be back again later in the week on Friday to cover all the big picture league topics that have been in the news this week.